Hello, and welcome to Your Colorful Path with Charu. Imagine someone going through a really tough, dark time and emerging on the other side with a whole new perspective. That's me. After a difficult divorce in 2020 that made me question everything about life and myself, I experienced a spiritual awakening. I went from seeing myself as just a jewelry designer from New York to recognizing the divine within me. This shift has healed my heartbreak and given me a completely new way to see life. Now I want to share this transformation with you through my story, insights, and everything I've learned along the journey. So grab your tea, get comfy, and let's dive in. There are so many parts to our stories, so many layers, like an infinitely layered cake. But there are some layers that are exceptionally raw and painful and enlightening at the same time. And today I want to talk to you about one such layer. This was my time in 2020. I was living in New York. I was then married to my past husband. And that was the year that we filed for divorce. And this happened because this was a marriage that was unhappy for a few years, but the final nail in the coffin was that my husband, my then husband, had revealed to me that a lot of the discomfort and heartache in our marriage was stemming from the fact that he wanted to be a woman. And when I say the rug was pulled out from under me, that is an understatement. The shock of that moment and the shock to your own system, I think, is immense. And to me, it hit really, really hard, because our intimate partners are people that we trust, that we know, that we think we know. And you, in a sense, are completely naked with them, and that's what you expect from them. And yet there can be truths about us that are so difficult to even process for ourselves that we may never bring it to our partners. And I believe that was the case with my ex-husband. However, this was a really, really big shock to my system. And as I said, our marriage had been struggling on many accounts, but this was the final nail. And painful as it was, I was able to make the choice for myself that this is not the path for me anymore. And I was very clear about who I am not. And so I decided to separate. And decoupling was exceptionally difficult. I realized many things about myself, and I think the more painful part was I didn't know who I was. Who was I without this marriage? And who was I without him? And I don't mean this in a way where I'm talking about, my career or anything else or financial support. Of course, those are important. But I had those. If I had a thriving career at the time, I've always been independent. So I was independent, but it felt more existential, so to speak. This really dark time brought me to my knees, and I didn't know who I was. I didn't know why I was. And I felt so exasperated and shocked by life that I wanted to end it. I didn't have the answers, and I just wanted all of this to stop. And in that very dark moment, where in a few moments my life would be over, there was this voice that I heard, and I couldn't figure out what it was and where I was hearing it from. And yet it was really mellow, soft, like a whisper. And then as I put my attention on it, it just became really, really loud. And I remember feeling really annoyed by this voice, because I was like, I just want life to end. I'm doing this. It was taking all of my energy and courage to do this now, ironically. And I don't want to listen to this voice. But the voice kept getting louder and louder, like a boombox. And the voice said, "This is not the end." I remember feeling very annoyed, but also very pulled by this voice. It's almost like I could not ignore it. And thankfully I didn't. And I listened to it and I stopped. And in that moment, I remember closing my eyes and telling this voice, well, if this is not the end, then show me the way. And I let it be. And of course, I now understand this was my higher self, a divine intervention to stop me from making this choice. And I listened. And so the path was shown to me. And I was introduced to Dr. Joe Dispenza's work by my sister, who is a practitioner of his work and meditations. And since I was grasping at straws anyway, I looked at some of his YouTube videos. I read a little bit about what he was talking about, and I decided to try meditation almost for the first time. And I had never really meditated before, but I was so desperate because all of the other things that we do in life to suffer, to protect ourselves and to process these shocks, I feel like they were not working for me. Like I was in a really dark space. And then I got into Joe Dispenza's work, and I remember doing the meditations and feeling confused and really like, is this going to work at all? But I was so desperate that I actually gave it a good shot. I read up everything that he was saying, and I remember this moment because I was watching his video on YouTube, and he was saying, if you do this work continuously and honestly for 60 days, your life will completely change. You will wake up happy to be alive. I remember feeling really annoyed by that because at that time, I was a person who was very close to ending my life. I felt hopeless. And to see this person talk about wanting to wake up where you're just happy to be alive, I felt like he doesn't know anything. And then I got to know Joe Dispenza's own personal story of how he got into the work. And that really inspired me because then I understood that this person knows suffering. He knows what it is to come close to the edge of wanting to just stop life. Anyway, so that's where this started. That's where my journey. I started reading up everything and I got into his work and I started meditating a lot. And initially I didn't know a lot, but I kept listening to his YouTube, his podcasts. There are some incredible podcast interviews that he was doing at the time. And I started going after those with a ferocity. And I have to say that it has really worked for me. I really enjoyed being in meditation because it took my focus off of what was going on in my life, very honestly. And it was quite a relief to be in that zone. And at the time, I didn't understand much, which I think was possibly the greatest thing that can happen as a meditator is that you don't know much about what's going on because your brain cannot kick in and make sense and pull you into stories. I started meditating an hour in the morning and an hour at night. That is not what he was recommending, but that is what I felt my life needed. And it soon became like, I don't know, like a drug. I loved being in the meditative state that way. And in 60 days, I felt a huge difference in myself. And I remember my friends saying to me, closest people actually that see you, I think when they say things like, well, we see you, you're doing amazingly. There is a difference. So whatever you're doing, keep doing. And then you also feel great inside. Then you know that you are doing something that is really making a change. And I was really inspired by his book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And I felt like I didn't even know who I was. I didn't see my own role in the greater scheme of things. And reading that book and reading his other book, Becoming Supernatural, and going to his retreats and really immersing myself in the challenge of transformation has given me answers about life and how it works. It has made me more confident in who I am. It has built my own understanding of who I am, who I want to be, with or without marriages, with or without relationships. And I'm not saying that these things are not important. I'm just saying that I think meditation brings you a bird's eye perspective of who you are, because you are not this little human suffering these huge mountains of problems, because that's how it feels when we consider ourselves just human. The deep dive into spirituality and its many different aspects has built my understanding of the fact that We are both human and divine, and our human existence, our human issues, our problems, our emotions are all perfect opportunities for us to go and have a meeting with the divine, which is meditation. Now I explain it to my friends like this. Meditation is how I take my human in me to go and have a meeting with the divine in me. And this understanding has been a gift of my spiritual awakening. It has completely transformed the way I think about myself, that I'm enough, that I'm worthy. And those things coming from someone who was at the point where I wanted to end my life and I didn't feel worthy to go on by myself, I think is quantum leap. That's what I call it. It's a quantum leap. And I love sharing this story because I know a lot of people maybe are at that point. And if that's one of you, then I want you to know to listen to that inner voice that says, this is not the end, because there is more and there is endless possibility, and that change is possible. Everything is possible. It just starts with you. It just starts with you making a different choice than before. That's all it takes. If any part of my story or this podcast resonates in a deep way, please do share. I would love to listen. And please feel free to connect with me on my Instagram at Divine Amuleto.